Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much, Sharq Forum and Mr. Wadah, for your invitation for us all the way from Malaysia to join this auspicious conference where we may share our thought and our insight regarding this very important topic about the shift global order and how it impacted our region and particularly our Malaysia as a state in the region. So before I go further, I would like to mention that my presentation will be focusing on the role of our new Prime Minister, Mr. Anwar Ibrahim, and how he maneuvered his move and to deal with this shifting global order, particularly in our region, which is the Southeast Asia. And before I go further, I would like to say that with the ascension of Mr. Anwar to the premiership in our country, I think that is one of the meaningful change that happened in our country. Yes, we do have a change in 2018, but I think this time around, we finally got a leader who is really committed to the real reform, not only in the country, also reform towards the policy towards the other countries as well. So I would like to begin with some anecdotes and some backgrounds that is happening lately in our region. First anecdote is, before that, as a caveat, I would like to mention here that I am not speaking on behalf of the Prime Minister Anwar or representing him, because this is merely an analysis of media reports and also parliament statement, and to prove or to indicate Mr. Anwar's approach in dealing with the shift of the global order. The first anecdote that I would like to share is a Pew Research report on a survey conducted just last year, 2022, on the public perception of the global superpowers. It's very interesting that the research indicates that more than half of the Malaysian population have a very positive impressions toward the Russia, in spite of the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. This indicates a very interesting point that our population, they would like to construct their own position, and they are not easily buy in with what the media, especially the Western-led media, would like to inform them, but they have the option to construct or develop their own impression. I think that would be a very interesting, thing that we need to consider. And second the second context that I would like to mention here is that currently we are facing China's aggression in our maritime area, especially the South China Sea area. And we are actually having our regional and national interests at stake, primarily due to this kind of aggression. China has been sending their vessels to the area which they deem fall within their historic territory, known as the 9 dash lines. The 9 dash lines stretch from the mainland China until our maritime territory in Southeast Asia. In spite of that, Malaysia is also the vanguard of the Malacca Strait. So it is one of the busiest choke points in the world. That this is very important to ship or to deliver goods and commodities between East and West. So anything that happened in this particular part of the in this strait, like blockage or conflict that happened in this strait, it will cause a big problem to China. This is what the former China President Hu Jintao termed this as the Malacca dilemma. So China is also in a dilemma because they want to to strengthen their influence in the maritime area, but they also have a very strong interest or strong interest in the Malacca Strait as well. So, with China's aggression in our region, it invites the presence of other superpowers as well. The presence of other superpowers is getting more prevalent in our region, even though NATO is not there yet, but the US is the presence of the US is all around. So, for instance, there is a pact, a trilateral security pact between Australia, United Kingdom, and the US, known as the AUKUS, AUKUS, beginning September 2021, whereby the US and the UK is assisting Australia to acquire nuclear-powered submarines. According to the US ambassador to Australia, Carolyn Kennedy, she mentioned that this is among the greater and the deeper collaboration between these three countries in order to provide a lot of deterrence in the Indo-Pacific region. And China sees this as a response to its emerging superpower in the region and accuses those countries that joined the pact as having this Cold War mentality. And I would like also to mention here that just 3 days ago, the Philippines started, it is 4 days ago, the Philippines started its trilateral maritime exercise with the US and Japan that are aiming to face the China's aggression in the South China Sea. And this also shows how Philippines, now our neighbor, has become a strong US ally with Ferdinand Marcos and the new president that took over from a pro-China president, which is the Rodrigo Duterte. So this is the context whereby our new Prime Minister come and take over the position. And under the Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, Malaysia is adeptly navigating its foreign relation in this, what we call the changing global order. And his experience in diplomatic approach play a very crucial role in steering our foreign policy ahead. So Malaysia aim to strike a delicate balance between major superpowers, including United States, China, and other regional players. Diplomatic channels are utilized to seek a peaceful resolution based on international law for the disputed claim in the South China Sea and the AUKUS Pact. Committed to the ASEAN way of diplomacy, as mentioned by our Prime Minister, he seems to prioritize Malaysia's commitment to peace, stability, and mutually beneficial cooperation. So some may have criticized our Prime Minister as he doesn't raise the Uyghur issue during his visit to Xi Jinping president in China last time. But however, during the China visit, Mr. Anwar engaged with the Muslim business community to the extent that a former minister in Malaysia suggests that this move indirectly demonstrated solidarity with the persecuted Uyghur population without having to embarrass the host country, which is China, and preserve the bilateral relationship between the two countries. So we can see how our Prime Minister, Mr. Anwar Ibrahim, take a very careful and very delicate approach in preserving the relationship between Malaysia and China as a superpower. Following his visit to China, Prime Minister Ibrahim informed the Parliament that Chinese official has raised concern about our oil company Petronas involvement in the Kasawari gas field situated in the disputed area of the South China Sea claimed by both China and Malaysia. And our Prime Minister expressed willingness to negotiate with Beijing if it was the condition. Even though this has led the opposition to accuse our Prime Minister of indirectly recognizing China's claim and potentially compromising the Malaysia's territory, but the foreign minister came and explained that the Prime Minister and the government is firmly with our territory, but we prioritize diplomacy and discussion over other approach. So other than that, Mr. Anwar's vision extends beyond mere stabilization of the region amid the present economic flux, as he also sees the establishment of an Asian Monetary Fund as a strategic initiative as far as major powers are concerned. This is an old idea, last time proposed by the Japanese during the 1997 ASEAN financial crisis, and Mr. Anwar during that time, as the rising political star in Malaysian politics, is firmly in supportive of that idea. And this time around, when he got into power, he mooted back this idea in the last ASEAN summit last May, that this ASEAN Monetary Fund should be, be the aspiration of the ASEAN countries, so that we will have another option other than the IMF. So what is
last 2 minutes? Yeah.
2 minutes, okay.
Please.
What is more interesting that during his visit to China, Anwar won the backing of President Xi Jinping on this particular proposal of AMF, ASEAN Monetary Fund. And among the first steps have been taken by the country is to slowly moving away from the dollar. This could be identified that from 1st of April onwards, trade between Malaysia and India can be done in currencies of either country, not anymore in dollar. So however, replacing dollar with other currencies might be a long way to go. If you can see, yuan accounts for only about 2% of global payment and less than 3% of world currency reserve. But we see that our Prime Minister would like to be at the forefront of this kind of initiative. So I think I end with that. Aktafi bihadul qadar. Shukran lakum.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ahmed Bad.
Shukran. Thank you.
I'm sure it was full of information, and the audience, the qualified audience across the table would have a lot of insights to contribute it to, especially regarding the role of Strait of Malacca, and when you have got joint ownership of Singapore and Malaysia, how much can it be of bargaining chip for you? And especially when there's a hung parliament, what will be the bargaining power of the government? And when you are talking about this expansionary policy of both the poles, and within the country, the rise of past party, how it would be looked from outside, but we would delay it till the final session where you'll be dealing with the questions. So now I would be moving to without a further delay, Muhammad Nazmul Islam, who would be looking at China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC, and its role in terms of America or US policy in the Asia Pacific. And naturally that would bring in what is the China's strategic role there, and how they are leading to a conflict there, and how that can be dealt with the countries which are there situated in that region. You also have 15 minutes, no favor for you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Brother Afan, for inviting me and also organizing this timely and very prestigious conference. I mean, indeed, the topic like shifting global order, the thing is very clear. It means that the order of the world which is changing. I mean, when you are looking to this the term like global order, from academic perspective, it's very clear. Like there was order, and it is going to be changed, or it is in a transition point. For example, like when we are talking those kind of global order, we have to always look at the order means justice system or international law. We have to look at the groups, like who are with whom, and also we have to look at the community, like, okay, then who is making a new community. So these three things are very basic actually when we are talking any region or any powerful system, whatever it is, unipolar or multipolar or unilateral or multilateral system. So in here, of course, I will just look at a specific region, South Asia, and when I'm going to talk about South Asia, basically try to see the Pakistan as a case study. I mean, in my speech here, I just try to push it. Pakistan, in the case of South Asia, it's a key country to understand the global powers or global orders competition. So the actors who are playing there, with whom, I mean, how we can choose it and how we can analyze it. And that's why Pakistan is really the key country. I mean, in a basic way, it's very clear China's initiative in 2017, or if we want to go more precisely, like in 2013 when China initiated the Belt and Road Initiative. I'm sure like all of we know very well about those things. But in the case of South Asia, 2017 is very important because China first started their CPEC initiative, and of course like, it's not something like a project as China is doing in all over the world. It's a more than project, and it's a part of the strategy. So what China is doing as they are doing in Africa or any other region in the world, I mean, we start with by focusing on economy, then it's moved to the many strategic perspective. I mean, it looks like China started the things with a soft engagement, and then it moves as like a Chinese assertiveness, and then it moved as like a Chinese offensive policy in that particular region. So by looking at the Pakistan, we can see, of course, to understand the Chinese policy, we have to see how America is giving their reactions. I mean, that thing would be very clear. I mean, after the 2017 to so far now, it looks like the China is basically taking action in the region, while America is actually making reactions. So the whole policy in South Asia, whatever it is in Pakistan or Sri Lanka or Bangladesh or Nepal, even Afghanistan, it is all about the American reaction. So when we are analyzing the reactions of a particular country, whatever it is X, Y, Z, any actors, it looks like they are in a transition period. It means like their power is declining. Yes, the question is here, the declining of the power, we can't actually frame the time, but by looking at the history, it's very clear the power is in the, I mean, in a stagnant point, and that's why they are making or providing so many reactions. Now come here, I mean, just try to frame some facts, what we can understand the region. Of course, my brother, he already talked something about AUKUS. That's a very important thing, and also Quad, because to understand the scenario, American reactions, like how and what way they showed their reactions. So one is the Quad. Of course, it has been started like a socio-development or something based on development project, but after 2018 or 2017, it turned back as like it's a security organization. I mean, based on a security provided so many military perspective, and looks to that particular country where China have their specific ambition, or they have their specific, let's say, I mean, effective policy. One thing is very clear for China. I mean, China, they took some model countries in all over the world. Let's say from Africa, maybe we can say that Djibouti could be one example. From South Asia, Pakistan is a good model. I mean, for Chinese, I mean, to understand Chinese foreign policy effectiveness. Even even also, I mean, from, let's say, Eurasian countries, Middle Eastern countries, they always choose one country. In what way they try to show to the world, look, this is our policy, this is our soft engagement. Look to that particular country's economic situations, political situation, security situation, and by engaging with us, we provide the peace. And that's they relate with their foreign policy. As we know, I believe, like the Chinese, the main motto, like to establish the peaceful rise and to show to the world, like, okay, our policy is more harmonious. And that's the way they're engaging, and they show to the world, like, okay, this is our model. But as I talk, like in America, I mean, for them it's not something like that, and that's why they did something. And the Quad could be the really good example, especially for South Asia, because they took and they choose one side. India, I mean, of course, like Japan or Australia, there's an important actor to understand these things. But for South Asia, they totally take their side and see their policy in South Asia with India. And that was the one of the, I mean, from American perspective, one of the clear signal that, okay, they are not enough to handle the issue or to compete with China in there, and they need some other actors with whom they want to see their policy. Here, I mean, the security and the current political instability in Pakistan. I mean, we have, of course, I mean, the recent is more chaos and chaotic, and also there is a big questions like, okay, how we have to read the future of the internal politics. But as I just try to emphasize on something, I mean, from the external, and we have only 15 minutes, so I need to just talk more of some external factors to see the region. As I told like earlier, I mean, as USA, they put India to make their foreign policy interest in there. What happened? I mean, we have been seeing, I mean, since 2014, when a government came to the India, it was very clear, like Indians' foreign policy to many actions, it has some success from the Indians' perspective. But in the region, the way they behave with other countries, especially to interfere in other countries, because they have a partnership with some unilateral power. So for example, they interfere in, let's say, in Bangladesh. That could be a very good example. Even, I mean, the crisis, especially from the external side, as I told earlier, I mean, in Pakistan, the scenario is going to be bigger because here is a very clear game politics is going because of American side with some specific country with whom Pakistan have many internal and external issues. And also, if we look to the many contexts, like in the internal problems of Nepal from 2018 and also the Sri Lanka in 2021, and also some other interesting issue, for example, Afghanistan. I mean, that could be also one of the great failure for India. For example, I mean, as they try to see the South Asia could be their region where they can apply any policy in their way. And also another factor is Myanmar. I mean, in Myanmar, for example, of course, when we are reading the Rohingya issues, I mean, we are trying to see it from a humanitarian perspective, but from the out of the humanitarian perspective, India, for example, they are also acting something like they are the regional hegemony. So the thing is, I mean, if I want to relate it with the issues, for example, like in a concluding way, I mean, those scenarios like the Quad and India's role in the region and also the Pakistan's crisis or any other country's internal crisis, it was happening because of this power gap, I mean, vacuum. But there is a big mistakes we have to read, like when we are seeing this kind of, let's say, regional power, like India, for example. I mean, there is a very good assessment. It was made by Professor Joseph Snai, I mean, to show trap, I mean, analyzes the America and China's competition, and he tried to address the issue like Kindleberger trap and try to show that after the Second World War and before this, after the First World War and before the Second World War, there was some kind of vacuum of the power, and that vacuum of the power pushed pushed Germany to think like, okay, it's our time to again start a war. I mean, especially let's take it like a not world war, it's a European war. So that's the example that could be the way also we can see it in South Asia. So what we have been seeing, the India, they are trying to think like, okay, there is a vacuum of power and they can do in the region, let's say like from different arena, whatever it is, actor A, B, C, D, I mean like any countries in South Asia, from Pakistan to Bangladesh to, I mean, even especially the issues like Kashmir, issues like Rohingya issues. I mean, all of the things are interrelated because India is trying to fill up that vacuum. And in a recent times, it's also very interesting. USA, they are not exactly trusting the way they trusted India before. For example, again, that could be a good example to see the scenario. For example, in a recent times, just a couple of weeks ago, USA, they gave a sanction on Bangladesh, and they are planning also to give a sanction on like visa restriction or some other things, though it was very clear the government, which are very, how we can say it, I mean, the very good partners of the India, it means like Western partners, but it looks like the US, they understood the way they tried to read the region, especially to make their reactionary plan, especially in Pakistan or in Bangladesh, in Sri Lanka, it is not as well outputted. And now come up here again, the China is quite successful in that area because they are still trying to show to the world, look, we don't have any interest in a political problem in that region, in political issues in whatever it is, Pakistan or any other countries. We are trying to do everything based on our economy or based on our business or export. That's the way they are trying to behave. Even also the way they are also behaving in here, I mean, it very clear, like for example, for one of my research project, I talked with many policymakers from Pakistan, even also the security personnel. It's very clear they are seeing the China in a positively because as even also in I think yesterday we have a mini discussion about in let's say Middle East, for example, why the rulers, like let's say the peoples who are making rule, why they're happy with China, because China is very clear, we are not interfering in your politics. So for a short term, indeed, it's a good things for China because I can tell it from very good persons, I mean diplomats from China. While of my research, he just said like, okay, China, they can wait more than 100 years again. I mean, why it is? Because China, they have a history where China had a civilization more than 5,000 years. So if we don't want to show, 1 minute?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so if we want to show another, let's say, patience more than 100 years, it will not change any discourses of our foreign policy, because we have a history that's a more longer than the USA. So whatever USA will make or give a reactions to the region or any particular world, they will not show any kind of, I mean, reactionary plan. Whatever they will do something like, okay, that could be the, if we compare with the USA, like could be the 20% or 15% as a reactionary plan. And that's not just Chinese foreign policy, and that could be also the good example by looking at the Chinese engagement with Pakistan, even also the other countries in South Asia. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Like I said before, the speakers obviously would have the opportunity for further insights with this qualified audience, and you will also have the opportunity to cover further, because I think a lot of it is also historically connected to the repercussions of the 2001 war in Afghanistan and what it led to, especially if I don't use euphemism and if I say in plain words, the defeat of United States quite recently and its departure from there. Besides that, the nuclear power status of Pakistan, that makes it quite different, and the scenario of that region different from the other countries. And I forgot to mention, when we talk about currency, I mean, obviously, whenever we are going for a currency war or something, the 1997 crisis would come to the mind of the Southeast Asian countries. So, having said so, we already have Dr. Faisal Davji with us. and I would give the podium to him, and 10 minutes, please, to have a discussion or comment on the speakers.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to join you, though I can't be with you in person. I just want to start out by saying that the great irony of the US exit from Afghanistan has been that Pakistan's importance has collapsed globally. The Taliban's new rule in Afghanistan is not necessarily friendly to Pakistan in any significant way. And indeed, it tries to reach out to a number of other countries and regions to legitimize itself internationally on its own terms. With the loss of Afghanistan as a kind of hostage, which was the role that Afghanistan played for Pakistan for the last 20 years, Pakistan has lost its own doctrine of strategic depth, and its army has now returned, as was entirely predictable, into a pro-American, seeks to return to a pro-American policy. And some of what is happening domestically in Pakistan today has to do with the tussle over that desire. You also see that Pakistan has been ignored both in the North-South corridor that it proposes to link Russia to Iran, and then through the Gulf and the Indian Ocean, which has India rather than Pakistan as its endpoint, and also ignored by the sort of US effort to construct a set of alternative Belt and Road type mechanisms across the Middle East, again through the Gulf and the Indian Ocean, which also has India as one of its terminus points. Now, this may have to do with the fact that Pakistan is as yet unreliable in terms of infrastructure, in terms of political stability, and indeed economic viability. And those facts may well change. But I just wanted to start out by saying that Pakistan has seen a kind of extraordinary collapse in its global ambition and in its global status. The very moment when its great victory was achieved by the exit of Western forces from Afghanistan, it actually relied upon those Western forces there. Now, having said that, I want to say something about the big conflict in Asia, which is, of course, India and China. It's a conflict that has already broken out into war in the 1960s. At that time, too, India was the inferior power. It is even more inferior today. And India is caught in an impossible situation. It realizes that no matter how many AUKUSes it joins and how many Quads it joins, the West or the Greater West is unlikely to come to its aid in any significant way. The war in Ukraine is ample proof of that, of what can be done. If that kind of aid cannot suffice in Europe itself, it's not going to happen in Asia. And India, of course, has been asked to join the collective West in Southeast Asia and in a kind of maritime logic of political one-upmanship. But the West makes no comment at all on Chinese incursions on Indian territory. So the land war, which is the war that India and China had in the past, and one that is likely, if one should happen again, it's likely to be a land war, not a maritime dispute as much, it receives no attention at all. And the Indians, of course, know that this is, they might go along with the Quad in various ways, but they will insist on their neutrality. And I'll come back to neutrality because I think neutrality is very, very important, not simply because we see its extraordinary expansion in our own day with the Ukraine war. And neutrality is not really being given its due in this war, because in the West, the language is all about pro-Russia or, anti-Russia. And of course, this is not really the issue. India is not necessarily pro-Russian. Indian elites are much more attuned to the West. They have no interest in Russia at all, culturally and in any other way, economically. Their views are entirely directed towards the West, but that doesn't stop them from being neutral. So it's not about being pro-Russian in any other sense. In fact, it's about neutrality. As I said, I'll come back to that. Now, Pakistan has found neutrality to be an impossible status to maintain given its own economic and political difficulties, which is why it does what it traditionally does. It shifts between rival powers, traditionally China and the US, without placing its trust in either one. I'm not sure that can continue for very long, which is why I think the army, at least for the moment, has shifted back in the American direction. As far as India is concerned, it has historically played the role of a neutral power and will continue to do so, while at the same time doing something quite new, which is expanding its geopolitical reach. Both India and China, of course, are doing this. Their bad relations started out at the time of independence and at the time of the making of China as the making of the PRC, I should say. Their relationship was all about scaling down an imperial inheritance. So they had inherited disputed or ambiguous borders thanks to colonial forward policy, which they struggled to, unsuccessfully, I should add, struggled to maintain. Today, the logic of the conflict is quite different. It's no longer about trying to scale down an imperial inheritance. It's about trying to claim that imperial inheritance. So both India and China are much more expansive in their geopolitical ambitions. China, of course, has a vision, a truly global vision of the future, whether you believe it or not. India doesn't really seem to have it. They seem to be concentrated far more on domestic political issues because, of course, it is a democracy of sorts, and therefore domestic political issues loom very large. And if I can put it in this way, I think that China's global vision is deliberately non-Soviet. It takes the decline of the Soviet Union as a fearsome precedent which it wants to avoid, whereas Russia's is post-Soviet in the sense that it seems to be heading in a direction of one-man rule and an oligarchy. So authoritarianism at home and an oligarchic economic structure, both domestically and internationally. Now, let me conclude by returning to what I promised, neutrality. What I think is so interesting and has come to really come to the fore thanks to the Ukraine war is the fact that for the first time since the Second World War almost, what we have is the reassertion of neutrality in such a way as to remake, even without a vision of a global order, such a global order is coming into being inadvertently and without a plan, as it were. Now, let us recall that neutrality had been crucial to earlier visions of an international order. It was crucial both because it limited conflict, it prevented conflict from spreading, and also because it made for mediation, that neutral powers were meant to mediate in the conflicts that did exist. Neutrality was made a kind of almost criminal act initially with the League of Nations, much more strongly with the United Nations, and absolutely erased by the time you get to the War on Terror. So the moment you have sanctions regimes, neutrality is impossible, especially, of course, if it's the United States that is imposing sanctions and third-party sanctions. But the failure of the war on terror, despite its the enormous destruction it's unleashed, has, I think, resulted in the return of neutrality. As I said, without a plan, without a vision for a new global order. And I think what neutrality will do here is at least try to displace what is called the rules-based international order, something that is not, in other words, international law, that has taken the place of international law, the international law that was set aside entirely during the war on terror. And it's through neutrality that I think you're going to see developing the lineaments of a new global order. Now, whether and how countries will actually figure out how they might base a new vision of an international order or global order on this process of neutrality that we see happening all around us, one doesn't know. What I would like to think is that at the very least, and without dividing the world up into pro-American or anti-American or pro-Russian or anti-Russian or pro-Chinese or anti-Chinese, and without going back to the old idea of non-alignment, which only made sense in a bipolar global context. Today, we are not in a bipolar global context. If neutrality continues in the way that it seems to be heading, you will, I suspect, end up in a multipolar order, which is not an order formed by blocks. Let me hasten to add, because even with India and China, there are no blocks in place. China might have its Belt and Road mechanism. It's remarkably fragile, let us admit, but it has no blocks. Neither India nor China have hegemony even in their own region. So South Asia, therefore, has no political integrity as a region because India cannot exercise hegemony even over its smaller neighbors. And neither can China, not even vis-a-vis North Korea, which is fully dependent on it. In a curious way, North Korea plays the role that Afghanistan once used to play for Pakistan. So with neutrality, you might end up in a kind of non-block multipolarity, which, if multipolarity is to be our global future, will necessitate a kind of a politics of détente among the big powers, which include both China and potentially India, certainly Russia, the United States, who knows about the EU, and maybe one or two others. So you're likely to have with multipolarity. In fact, multipolarity can only come to exist with détente between the big powers and a far more active political scenario among the medium powers. And this too you already see happening. The role of Turkey in the post-Ukraine war situation, possibly the role of
Dr.
Pakistan in the future.
I would request you to
others.
conclude, please, shortly.
Yes, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was very insightful. The last commentator we have got here is Syed Azman Nawawi, a Malaysian parliamentarian. So I would just request you to share your thoughts.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to simplify the discussion that we are having this evening. To understand this region, we need to understand the realities that either South Asia or Southeast Asia, and what are the importance and strategic importance of this region itself. Adding to the discussion on Pakistan first, as being said and known to all, Pakistan is the one and only Muslim country that has the nuclear capabilities. Number two, it is strategically located with borders with India, Afghanistan, China, and Iran. And number three, its political stability is foremost important to ensure peace and security in the region. And number 4, if I can add up, the relationship between Pakistan and India are one of the most important in South Asia region. And the relationship is, I can term it as the love-hate relationship between Pakistan and India. Okay, going back to Southeast Asia, to understand Malaysia, Indonesia, and countries in Southeast Asia, we have to understand and know the strategic importance of this region. ASEAN. ASEAN is an association of Southeast Asian nations which was founded in 1967 with the key countries, that is Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand. It has played a significant role in this region in terms of security, political, culture, and economic integration. And the most important principle of ASEAN is mutual respect and non-interference in the internal affairs of one another. Another country, before I touch on Malaysia, is the strategic importance of Indonesia. Indonesia is a Muslim majority country with a population of over 280 million. It is the third fastest growing economy in Asia and largest economy in Southeast Asia. The economy expanded to 5.31% in 2022. Indonesia has abundant natural resources and its investment grew 3.87% in 2022. And Indonesia will face a stern and tough general election early next year. So these are the things that we have to understand and realize the strategic importance and the situation that we are discussing in Southeast Asia region and South Asia region. Coming back to Malaysia, my colleague has touched on a few issues, but I want to basically focus on the current situation in Malaysia itself. Malaysia is going to face a state election in the next month or so, whereby we are going to face a state election in six states, most probably in late August or early September. It's very important, a very crucial election under the leadership of Anwar Ibrahim. Malaysia also, under the stewardship of Anwar Ibrahim, I believe that will basically maintain a strategic relationship with the Muslim world. And Malaysia also will continue to maintain its cordial and mutual relation with the West, i.e. the United States, the European Union, and other countries. So that's it from me, and hopefully we can discuss further on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I would just hand over the session to respected Sheikh Wada Khanfar, and he would continue from here, inshallah.